I was introduced to Alex Jones back in 2004. A couple finishers that worked for me at the time were with me. They had been going down that rabbit hole for some time, and they encouraged me to listen to him. They picked him up on shortwave, and you could find him on the internet here and there. But anyways, I listened to him. I thought, okay, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. You know, these guys keep saying he has something worthwhile to contribute. I'll listen. And I thought he was crazy. But I kept listening, and eventually the stuff that he was talking about, like maybe within 6 months of when I first listened to him, some of the stuff that he was talking about actually was happening. And of course, within 2 years, it was a lot of it had happened. So it seemed like he had some kind of inside baseball. And he always talked about how he read the white papers of all these different organizations, that basically laid out in print what their ideas were, what they were planning on doing, how they were going to structure society. And none of it was good. But I would say that around the time that Ron Paul became a thing again, because apparently, he had made a splash earlier in, say, even the 70s or the 80s. I didn't know who he was, but Alex Jones had him on pretty frequently, and he kept talking about this big thing that was coming. And he didn't exactly say what it was, and he didn't say when it was coming. But he kept talking about this thing that was coming. And I, by that time, was a wild-eyed adherent to about every conspiracy theory rabbit hole that you could imagine. Having the scales fall from my eyes, metaphorically. I stopped at that point. It wasn't a thing to be the phrase normie conformie wasn't a thing, but I was about as mainstream media as you could get. I believed the propaganda, and I'm not saying that I was on the left or anything like that. I was watching Fox News, but I didn't understand that it was just as controlled propaganda as say a CNN or a CNBC or MSNBC or any of those channels. But anyways, so rolling into 2008, that was my fiscally, that was my best year ever, in terms of the volume of work that I did. And in fact, I was doing so much volume that I let 14 invites to bid pass me by because I was so worn out that I just needed a break. But the reason I was worn out was I knew what Ron Paul was saying, that we were going to have something big happen to the economy. And I was working like a madman, and I had a lot of guys working for me at the time. But I was reluctant to add on any staff, say, in the office. I was still chief cook and bottle washer. When you have, between your employees and your subcontractors, you have 25 to 30 guys going and about 8 different projects running. 2-story wings being added to a nursing home and that kind of stuff. It was a lot of volume. We were doing a lot of volume, and I was the accountant. I was the payroll officer, the secretary. I was the field superintendent. I was the project manager. I was the owner. I was the truck driver and the warehouse guy. I did all of those things to keep those guys all moving because they were all production men. And as long as I could keep them going, that was great. The downside of that was I wasn't wearing my tools. In managing people and not wearing my tools was the least happy that I'd ever been. But this was all coming along, and we were cruising at high speed. I was burning out. I was physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. And then a weight crashed. And we had some mopping up to do on some jobs, and did so. And then, at that point, we just kind of sputtered through to the end of the year on fumes, the last 3 months, not really doing anything. Not doing anything new for sure, just mopping up what was left to mop up. So, it was a banner year. But by the time I hit 2009, Ron Paul's prediction about this big crash came true, and I was bouncing along the bottom. But before the crash had happened, and because I knew it was coming, and because like I said, I was a wild-eyed adherent of the conspiracy-minded broadcasts of Alex Jones, I had bought storable food. I had bought a water tank, put it in the ground. I had stocked up on all sorts of non-perishables, freeze-dried and that kind of thing, in anticipation of us falling off a cliff. And the thing is that we did fall off a cliff, but we didn't fall off a cliff like I thought we would. It was more of a steep incline than a cliff. And the big long break that I wanted, or not even a big long break, but at least a break that I wanted, I got it. Unfortunately, we bounced along the bottom until fall of 2010. Things don't happen the way that you think they might. And preparedness, or all of that kind of mindset, you get ideas in your head about what it's going to look like, how it's going to play out. And I was wrong. I was wrong on how it played out. Now I've got freeze-dried storage that is, in 3 years, is going to be 20 years old. And they say, oh, well, rotate your stock, learn how to cook out of your storage and all the rest of that. But I had spent a lot of money on preparedness items that, frankly, what little bit of them we did use, it's not great stuff. I'm sorry, it's just not. You can kid yourself all you want to. I mean, if you want to eat rehydrated cardboard, knock yourself out. But for all the preparedness that we did, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Because I likened it to an insurance policy. You pay into an insurance policy never planning on using it. You hope that you don't. But you're betting against yourself. Your insurance company bets that you're going to be fine, and you bet that you're not. And as long as you're fine, guess who wins on a monthly kind of thing. And over the years, I'd say I've spent way more on insurance than I did on that food. Now, that food has a shelf life probably max of 25 years, so, I've got maybe 8 more years worth of food insurance left in this present store that I have. we built a greenhouse. I built raised beds. We have rain catchment barrels on our gutters. Got water filtration. We've got self-defense items. You know, we've done what we can, and part of that is even, you know, I sit in a shop full of all of these nice tools that need electricity, but I've got a good bit of hand tools around me that at best I just need to keep the blades sharp. Whether they're saws or axes or hammers or whatever, I'll still have the ability to build whatever I need to build. As long as I have something to build with. But in terms of preparedness, you could say it's foolhardy to invest in those things, but I've been pretty much, for the very longest time, especially in my business, a believer in what I call robust redundancy. And for me, robust redundancy, I'll use an example, is I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different levels of finishing equipment for finishing drywall. And you could say, well, all you need is a pan and a knife, maybe a paddle and a mixing drill, you know, and that's all you need. And maybe that's true. Maybe that is all you need. But if you're going to do volume, and you're not just going to hire on people, because people are expensive, you're going to look at what kind of tools can be a force multiplier. And one of the things that I did fairly early on, once I started finishing, was to buy a set of mechanical finishing tools. That's the bazooka and the boxes, you know, the tape, the automatic taper, and the box applicators, and I bought those. And it honestly took me about 6 months to really learn that system well. And it was the addition of a mini scaffold where I could bring my mud with me, you know, and be able to pump it right into the tools, and also to lay the tools across the top of the mini scaffold, you know, as I moved along from room to room. And then I was able to get up into the corners, you know, step up, because I could set it up like, you know, you can set those up like a step ladder with a couple steps. But it was real handy. It was real handy, and the addition of the mini scaffold and the refinement of the learning curve with those tools, I started to get bankable results. And ultimately, once you can start getting the finish that you want, you can pick up your pace to the point where I was nearly running with those tools. And then at that point, you know, ego and greed takes over, and you just go for it. But there was another system that was out there, and it was it had what they called a cannon, not a bazooka, but a cannon. It was Applitech, and it was a pneumatic system. It ran off of the power of compressed air. And I got talked into by those same finishers that had talked me into listening to Alex Jones. I got talked into using, buying that system and using it. And unfortunately for me, the learning curve was really steep with that, and I never quite mastered using the cannon, which was their automatic taper. And using their boxes was fine, but it was a great idea, but the engineering wasn't fantastic. And then from there, you know, obviously, if I step back in the story, there is a step between pan and knife and the automatic taping tools, and that's the banjo, and that's what most people are familiar with. You can buy those at Lowe's or Home Depot. You know, you can get a banjo, and there's a lot of people who use them and use them effectively, and I just never found them to be all that impressive. They were great if you wanted to use them to fire tape with, and you didn't care that you were going to be a mess when you were done. But anyways, the final step then was Applitech introduced direct feed to their system, where they replaced the pneumatic system with a Graco Mark V. Interestingly, it's a Mark V. a Graco Mark V texture rig. You know, it was a big mud pump, and it was made to pump a joint compound. And so I went ahead and bit the bullet on that one, and I bought that machine. You know, and it was, oh gosh, I don't even remember, maybe 2005-ish when I bought it, around that time, 2005, 2006, and it sat for a while in my front room of the house before I finally, you know, plugged it into the system and started using it. But I started using it, and it was phenomenal because you didn't have to run back to the machine. It had a 20, I want to call it a 26-gallon hopper that you could buy as an attachment for like $600 to add to this. I got the machine on sale for $4,500, but you could add it to this $5,000 machine, and you could load this thing up, and you could go from room to room to room with a high pressure line, you know, and it's running at 3,200 psi, and you could just coat and coat and coat and coat your flats, your butts, your angles. I suppose you could have hooked it up to the Canon, but again, the Canon just mechanically it wasn't superior to the bazooka, so I still use the bazooka for that part of it, you know, the taping. But the thing is with any of those things, you like with the air-driven tools and the direct feed mud pump, you had to have electricity, and a lot of times you get in these houses and they wouldn't have their service out there yet. So you had to run off a generator, and that's pretty hard on the equipment when you get the surges and the spikes, you know, the lags, the lulls or lags, and the spikes on your generator. So you know, you had to bring out quite a bit of equipment, you know, if you were going to be out in residential where there wasn't electricity, and if you had any problem, if there's any breakdown, the more parts you have to any system, the more potential points of failure you have. And so you should always carry your backup with you. And I mean, I've had more than one occasion where I had a box leaning against the wall and it slid down and it broke, slid down, hit the floor, you know, concrete floor or whatever, and broke the blade that was on the box, broke it loose, you know, from the brazed fitting. And other times when I had the cable in the bazooka snap on me. Cable runs in there, and you know, mechanically is drawn up. There's a cup in the tube that is the stopper, and you know, when you pump the tube full, it pushes that cup all the way down to the bottom of the tube, and then as you apply the mud, it has a almost like a pizza wheel that turns, you know, spins as you run it along the wall, and that spools up a cable, and that cable, you know, pulls the cup up, and that's what pulls the mud, or pushes the mud towards the opening, the orifice there where the tape is, where you're applying, you know, against the wall. Well, you break a cable, you've got a minimum of an hour's downtime, minimum of an hour downtime, maybe longer depending on situation that you're in. So you need to have a backup system, and that wouldn't mean that I would bring, you know, my mechanical tools and my air tools and the direct drive and the banjo. No, typically my robust redundancy would be I would have extra cables with me, or I would have more than one, you know, box of that particular size that I could use. You know, something happened, or a blade, I would have the tools to make the adjustments, and ultimately I would have that pan and knife, because even though you may have all the automation in the world, I mean, the more complex your system, the more points of failure, you better darn well know how to use your hand tools and be able to get a result, be productive with them and get a result. Well, that's, in my long-winded explanation, what robust redundancy is. I have a library, and I say it often. I have a library full of books that I haven't read. Quite a few of them are how-to kind of books, whether it's smoking meat, whether it's root cellaring, whether it's working with hand tools, whether it's masonry. I've got books on plaster, I've got an entire library, probably 70 plus books on woodworking. And when I say I haven't read them, I mean, yeah, I've read them. But just having the access to that resource, to me, is about as robust as you can be. Now, yeah, we could have a fire in a house and the whole thing could burn down. Books are made out of paper and, the whole Fahrenheit 451. I mean, I get it. The books, they can be eaten up by bugs, they can get rained on, have a water leak, a flood, they can burn up. So they're perishable, but they're also not reliant on whether or not your battery is fully charged, or you have an internet connection, and again, it's a robust redundancy. So if I were to recommend to anyone to be prepared for what could very possibly be a very chaotic next 5 years, it would be prepare yourself with knowledge, because you can take that with you always. Prepare yourself with experience. People make a very good point when they say, if you think you're going to plant a garden and you're going to can and you're going to make it through food shortages, you should be doing that now for real, because like when we built the greenhouse, we tried to do some starts, and we had these tall, spindly little things that we started in the house, and we took them outside and they just scorched. First year of the greenhouse, everything burned up. Second year, everything froze. I had to make modifications to the roof of the greenhouse for ventilation. I had to add a fan in the thing. There's all sorts of factors that you have to consider. And if you want to extend your season, then you got to think, well, how can I do that and do it on the cheap? And for me, I put in a rocket stove mass heater. I had some brick, and I went ahead and laid up some brick and filled it full of earth, and have my duct pipe in there, at a slow rise, and built my firebox and the whole thing, and it actually worked. It actually worked, and then I noticed that it wanted to, after like 2 or 3 hours, it would get hot enough that it would burn past. It would burn past the grate where the wood, because I was using wood pellets. It would burn past the grate and want to start burning up the tube to the can that I had turned into kind of a quasi hopper to gravity feed this system. But when I made the modifications, then it didn't work as well. So whatever blizzard of errors that I committed that actually looked out into a successful system, when I tried to correct a few of those errors, I screwed the pooch, and I haven't been back to it to repair that. So, as far as extending the season into winter, being able to grow winter vegetables, or whatever, that capacity isn't there. So, in terms of preparedness, yeah, don't just get the books like me and put them on the shelf, but, acquire some knowledge, something that's going to last, that's not on a DVD or a CD or in an MP4, I don't know, I'm tech-tarded, but, that's not in a format that's going to be electronically unavailable if we have, widespread outages or shortages, or the power just simply cuts off. Have some access to the knowledge resources, and then get some actual practical hands-on experience with those things. And that's probably the best thing that you can do. Um, if you were interested in looking up how to turn like a regular, just a cooler, like what you would put drinks in or something like that, getting some floss or batting, whatever, I don't know where you get it. Joanne Fabric's going out of business, but get it from wherever you buy that stuff. And look up how to make a water filtration device, so that you can at least have drinkable water, to take the contaminants out of it, and learn a little bit about that, and maybe learn a little bit about some wild foraging, but be careful with that, because there's some stuff that looks like some other stuff, and you eat the wrong stuff, and that'll be the last thing you eat. But wild edibles, things like that. How practical is that? Probably not. Probably not practical. But even if you were to acquire some means of self-defense, don't necessarily store pallets of the freedom seeds, I'll call them, in your basement. Get some and practice. Whether it's go to a range or have some instruction, have somebody who knows what they're doing, help you, figure out how to use it and become comfortable with it, and not just comfortable, but safely proficient with that thing. And don't think that that's some kind of cure-all, because it's not. Violence is the absolute last thing that you want to have to resort to. Absolutely the last thing you want to have to resort to. But often, just being prepared for the worst possible outcome sometimes will prevent them from happening. But I don't know if I'm making a point here or not, but I'd say that, way back in 2004, when the scales fell from my eyes, and I started to see the world through a different lens, really. I started to see that the path that we were on wasn't the best of paths, and right now, I don't see it improving tremendously. I am older, 62, and the majority of my life is behind me. That doesn't mean I'm ready to kick the bucket and, put me in the boat and light it on fire and push it out in the middle of the lake. I mean, I'm not to that point yet. But the energy, the hormone levels, and the rest of that to fight the good fight is waning, and I'm not resigned to things being worse, but I've also seen them get worse and get better and get worse and get better. It's something of a pendulum. The general trend is definitely worse. I'm not saying that Jones was wrong. I'm not saying that he's 100% right. Ron Paul was right. I wish he'd been more specific. Might have helped me avoid some expensive decisions. But well, being prepared for an uncertain future helps you to relax a little bit. It maybe staves off that nihilism that can creep in when you think that everything is just, why bother, you know, it's all just so bad and getting worse kind of thing. There were some people who felt that way in the 70s. I'm sure there were people who felt that way in the 30s. I'm sure there's been people who felt that way in every decade. Prepare yourself as best you can for whatever you meet on the ground. And if it's good times, prepare for good times. Have a little bit of robust redundancy. Know a few things. Maybe some of the old skills, you know, some of the old ways. Whether it comes to growing food or, you know, storing food or, you know, I don't know how to use the hand tools if you needed to. Maybe put back a little bit of something that might tide you over through a rough period of time, whether it's a few months or even a few years. But definitely prepare yourself. You know, the Bible always talks about gird up your loins, right? That was taking your toga or your robe or whatever the heck it was they wore back in the day, reaching down between your legs, grabbing that tail of that skirt, your kilt, whatever it was, pulling it up around front and tucking it into your belt, into your sash. As girding up your loins, it's basically get ready for action. And you can do that. You don't have to be rich to do it. You don't have to own a business and spend money and, you know, all that stuff. You can do it simply by learning. And, you know, there's quite a bit out there in the interwebs that will more than happily instruct you. Obviously, there's a lot of quackery out there, but if you watch enough of it, varied, you know, channels and stuff, you'll get an idea for who's knows what they're talking about and who's LARPing at all of that. But we can't all live in a van down by the river. So, anyways, I wish you well and get ready.